friend.
Well, I appreciate you saying so. Alrighty. Okay, we should be live. Let me pull up more things that we need.
I see us on the YouTube on my phone.
Fantastic. Can you hear us on the YouTube on your phone is my question.
On my phone.
Okay, great. There we go.
There it is. Hey, Dongwon, how you doing, man?
I am doing okay. I am juggling too many things.
I feel you. And
Okay.
I say that in the most appropriate, remote social distancing sort of way. But yes, I feel you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. How are you doing, Howard?
Um, it's been a rough go for the last couple of days. I had hay fever,
Oh,
the
geez.
kind where suddenly you've got nothing but your body's sole purpose is to cover you in a layer of mucus. Um,
Miserable.
and it turns out that this is one more thing where long COVID says, "Hey, doing that should make you tired."
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
oh man, I've literally been flat on my back for 2.5 days.
Ugh,
Um,
miserable.
yeah, but
Um,
I'm happy because this is a great gig,
this
and
is a great
we
gig.
get to answer some cool questions uh, from people who trust us against what I assume to be their better judgment. They trust us.
Well, we have things to say, and sometimes our advice is helpful, and sometimes it is a useful sounding board that'll help people figure out what it is they're trying to figure out. So that's the goal, at least. All right. So it looks like some people are filtering in. Sorry for the slightly late start today, guys. So yeah, hello everyone, and thank you for coming to this month's Writing Excuses Q&A live stream. I'm Dongwon Song, and I'm joined tonight by my co-host Howard Taylor. I believe you know us from a podcast that you might like. So this is our monthly series where two of the hosts will come on and answer questions that have been submitted by our lovely Patreon supporters. The stream is free for everyone, but if you'd like to have your question answered, your personal question answered, you can go to patreon.com/writingexcuses. And if you subscribe there, you'll be able to enter questions ahead of time for the Q&A. We don't have a ton of questions this month, so we'll probably have time to take questions from the audience too. So even those of you in the Zoom or on the YouTube or Twitch streams, feel free to drop a question into the comments, and if we have time, we will get to it. People in the Patreon and the Zoom get priority, but we might have a little bit of time to take questions from the general audience this week. So yeah, I think that is all the administration
That's
stuff.
the housekeeping.
That's the housekeeping. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. I am also going to record this at the request of our producer, if I can remember what the record button is. Oh, Howard, you might have host permissions. Do you?
I might have what?
Do you have host permissions?
To go under more and click record.
Yeah, maybe you don't. Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna grab it locally. What's one more AV thing on my computer?
It told me, please ask the host for permission.
Yeah,
to
I realized that neither one of us are technically the host, so you know what? Weirdly, I don't think this is a thing I can actually do.
Okay, Emma just would have used this to blackmail us.
I know.
That's
exactly. Oh wait, no, I figured it out. Okay, there we go. That should be working. Okie dokie. So, shall we answer some questions, Howard?
yes, let's.
All right. Do you want to read the first one?
I will read the first one, and it is a doozy.
Ooh.
Joseph Barter, who is with us in Zoom. Hi, Joseph.
Hello.
Joseph Barter asks, What social media presence should a writer have before getting an agent or self-pubbing their work? Would it make sense to have a personal website? I had one years ago, but it eventually got abandoned because I didn't have anything to add to it. Let me turn the whole thing upside down and start at the end. It eventually got abandoned because I didn't have anything to add to it. Big mood. I feel you. That happens a lot. 2 thumbs up. Would abandon a website again. And then the next is, you said before getting an agent or self-pubbing your work. Getting an agent and self-pubbing your work. Oops, I whacked my microphone with my hand. I feel like those are two decidedly different conditions. And I think I want to throw the ball over the fence to Dongwon about what kind of social media presence do you want a writer to have if you're agenting them?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because it's an evolving question right now. The social media landscape is, let's be very generous and say, is evolving right now. The less generous interpretation is maybe collapsing, maybe dying, maybe falling apart. Hard to say. Social media, in the way that we've been using it for promotion for authors and other creators, is in a really weird spot right now. The collapse of Twitter in particular, or the shift of Twitter to whatever it is now, has been a major issue. Everyone migrating to Blue Sky or to other versions, like Mastodon. There's just been a big fracturing on the social media side. The kind of social media that we see that is working to build a brand and promote authors is stuff like TikTok, is stuff like Instagram Reels. That's a totally different vibe from the kind of social media presence we used to have before to what we have now, right? So like sort of the kind of everyday text engagement social media that we had that was great for networking and building brand awareness based around sort of at least a roughly linear timeline, somewhat algorithmic, but there was still like a general adherence to like, this is the conversation that's happening this week. Here's my profile. Here's the information. Here's what I post in timeline order. That is like truly gone at this point, right? Like that is just not really how the internet is interacting anymore. It is so much more around algorithmic feeds in a very aggressive way that are very deprived of context, right? So the kind of social media that's working to promote authors is very sort of like video content driven, right? So really I'm talking about TikTok here, I'm talking about Instagram here. That's a long kind of not helpful answer to sort of the question. What I'm saying is a little bit right now, worry less about social media presence and platform than you would have had to a few years ago, because it's in such a state of flux. There's not really a lot of clear directions in which ways to jump, right? If you are working in specific fields, including prescriptive nonfiction, so if you're working in like advice or diet or memoir, then like you will need to have a very strong platform in your field. You'll need to have a lot of followers and a lot of presence, either on YouTube or podcast or something like that, right? So when you say social media presence, I think right now, think much more expansively about what that means than it meant 5 years ago, which was be on Twitter. Now it means have a newsletter, have a personal website, be on TikTok, be on Instagram, have a podcast, whatever it is, right? Have things that get your content in front of as many people as possible. Now, you are a writer. You're not a celebrity. You're not a musician. You're not a content creator or an influencer, and nobody's asking you or looking at you to do those things. If you happen to be those things, that can be helpful for your career, but don't think that's something that you must do. Howard, look like you want to.
Yeah, I've got a big surprise. I've got a metaphor here.
Yeah.
Okay. If in the early 19th century, you had asked the question, do I need to take a steamship to Europe? Well, steamship wouldn't have been an option. Should I sail to Europe? The answer would have been, well, maybe. What do you need to do in Europe?
Yeah.
And here are my favorite shipping lines. They're all tall ships. Over the last 2 centuries, should I go to Europe? has become two questions. Question number one is, why do you want to go to Europe? What is the business you need to do there? And the other is, do you want to fly? Do you want to steam? Do you want to cruise? Do you want to take a sailboat and attempt a world record of some sort? What is and so there's two questions here. And the one is all about the evolving technological and sociological and economic space of the internet. And the other is, what kind of marketing presence do you need as an author?
Yeah.
And I think that by separating that into two different questions, we're better able to address it, which is why I threw the ball to you in the first place, Dongwon. As an agent, how much of a writer's marketing do you want to encourage the writer to do?
I would encourage the writer to do as much as they are interested in and as much as they are good at it, right? So like it.
Yep.
I guess what I'm trying to say with all my like kind of rambling is we have moved into an era where the stuff that is working are very advanced social media and content production techniques, right? This is like real content production and creation in terms of how to post, compelling stories on Instagram and TikTok, how to have a good newsletter, how to, have a great podcast. These are things that take a lot of skills, a lot of time, and a lot of effort. So having a social media strategy right now is still very effective. It is less easy to do while you're doing 8 million other things and less easy to do passively without investing a great deal of energy into it. So as a result, my recommendation is fairly simple, which is to make sure you have your profiles on all these platforms. Make a TikTok account, make an Instagram account, have a newsletter. You don't have to be very active on these things. You just need to have them so that you can use them when you need them. Now, in terms of your personal website, this is the easy one. This is the very easy one. Have a personal website. It is not that expensive. It's however much it is to hang on to that domain. If you use Squarespace or something like that, it's like, $20 a year. It's not a huge cost to have a personal website that looks nice and professional. You said something about not having it updated. The only thing it needs to have is your picture, if you are comfortable sharing that, your name, and the word somewhere that says professional author, professional writer, right? You need to have a website that tells me you're a writer. So when I Google your name, when you query me, I find a website that says this is a real person who is an author, right? So you want to grab that, you want to have that. The idea of having a website with regularly updated content in terms of like having an author blog or whatever is extremely early 2000s. That is not something you need to do. That's not something you need to worry about. If you want to have a content newsletter to drive people to you and as a piece of shareable content that people engage with, interact with, again, see further earlier comments on complex social media strategies. It's a great idea. It works very well. I encourage all of my authors to have a content newsletter if they are good at writing essays and if they are good at promoting those and if they enjoy doing it. If that's not you, don't do it. All you need is a website. All you need is an Instagram profile that when I click on it, shows me that you are a real person, not an AI bot who is aware that you want to be a professional author, right? So that's what I'm encouraging you to do, which is really kind of bare minimum. You are freed from the having to have a 10,000 follower Twitter profile to get a book deal kind of world. Weirdly, we have been freed from that at the same time that social media has gotten scarier and more difficult to engage with. So it's a real good news, bad news situation, in my opinion. Promoting books has gotten harder significantly. The reason I'm sort of blathering so much and trying to respond to this question is I don't have good answers right now because I'm trying to figure it out alongside all of y'all right now. I don't think anybody has good answers. There are people who figured pieces of it out, right? Like Rebecca Yarros, Red Tower, that whole, gang clearly have figured out a certain strategy that works around merch and special editions and book talk. That is like a very complex strategy that a very small set of people can execute on. Holy shit, does it work? Clearly, as Rebecca Yarros has sold 1 billion copies of that series over the last couple of years, or last year, or however long it's been. So there's a lot of stuff happening out there. If you're interested in social media, if you're interested in developing these strategies, I encourage you to go for it, figure it out. There's a huge opportunity out there be the person who cracks that. But also, if that's not you, don't stress about it too much. It is not as much of a prereq as it used to be. That's the short version of the very long rambling.
That's the short version. Okay. I wrote some notes in the spreadsheet before we got started. If you're self-pubbing, you will need a lot of presence online. The knob goes to 11. If you're working through an agent, you can let them help you figure out where the dial should be set. But I have lots of thoughts here because this is marketing. It's a 2-hour seminar. Dongwon and I could just talk and talk and talk about strategy and techniques and tactics and shifting technologies. And ultimately what it comes down to is, and that's why I broke out the go to Europe metaphor. If you're self-pubbing, you're the individual who needs to cross the Atlantic and go to Europe, or cross the steps and go to Europe the other direction, I suppose. I'm very American centric. Sorry about that. Because nobody else is going to do it for you. If you're agented and you have a good deal with a publisher and an editor, hey, maybe they will do it for you. And you can sit back and live in the heaven that is just writing books and sending them off, and that's awesome. I think we should take the next question, because I could keep talking about this, and you could keep talking about this.
I could keep talking about this for the next 3 hours.
It's so huge.
It's a huge topic. It's a great question. The simple answer is have a website, grab your profiles on as many platforms as you can. If you feel like posting, post. If you don't feel like posting, don't post. It's fine. That's the short answer. Okay, so the next question, kind of a long question again. I'm having trouble with story length. At the moment, I've written one complete first draft of a novel, 3/4 of another that I'm taking a break from, and I've just started a third, which I hopefully might get to the editing stage. All are fantasy, and I lean more towards outlining than discovery. My issue is that editing is often spoken about in terms of cutting things, but not much is said about the opposite problem, underwriting. Every novel is meant to be around 100,000 words to fit the genre convention. When I reach the end, my first novel is only 45,000. The other ones look like they might also be around about the same. And each one, despite being only that short, has ended up with 30 to 50 chapters, which are quite short, and that's before cutting things. How can I increase the lengths of my books, both in outlining and future editing? And how can I make my chapters a better length so my epic fantasy 3 POV book with 50 chapters isn't just 40,000 words? Great question. Really, really interesting. Underwriting is very common, right? Like I work with a lot of writers. You know, a bunch of them overwrite for sure. I definitely have the set of people who it's like, okay, every time it comes in, we're like, how are we going to scale this back? How are we going to fit it down? But a big chunk of them also are underwriters, where it comes in, 50, 60,000 words, and we know we're going to have to do a lot of layering, a lot of adding on to it. I think the first thing I'm noticing here is you're working on a lot of books kind of in parallel, right? You're producing a lot of words. You're producing a lot of words across 3 different ideas. If you're having trouble with underwriting, if you're having trouble getting the depth and layers and complexity in, I would really encourage you to be more disciplined about how you're working on these and focus on one project and lean into it and put more of that thinking that is clearly going outward, sort of more into the individual project, more into the one that you are working on right now, and try and make sure that all that creative energy isn't being dispersed and is really focused on one thing, right? So that's a very high level way to think about it. But my first instinct in listening to you talk about this is okay, you're ending with a lot of short chapters. You're working off of an outline. You're sort of hitting your beats, but not adding layers of complexity to that. And part of that may be because your eyes are going all over the place, as opposed to really drilling down into this and being okay, what else does this scene need? What else does this chapter need? And really devoting all of your attention and thought and energy into the thing that you're working on now until it's really fleshed out, until it is the thing that you want it to be. I have a couple other thoughts here, but I want to toss it to Howard if you have initial reactions first.
3 thoughts. First and foremost, a novel doesn't have to be 100,000 words. Short is fine. It is entirely possible that you have told the story you needed to tell and gotten the effect that you desired to get with the words that you put on the page. And that's acceptable. Now, 30 chapters across 45,000 words, those are short chapters. You know, those, each one of those, that's 1,000 words, 1,500 words per chapter, which is short and a little weird. And I'm reminded of, I can't remember the author.
James Patterson?
There was, no, it was Zoo. And I can't remember, you know, big name author, but he's not the one who wrote it. And it was super, and you know, it's probably best that we don't name drop any further. It felt super amateurish to me because the pacing was there, but the chapters were all very short. It was, and I bought it in an airport, and it was very much an airport novel.
Yeah.
It made a ton of money and it got a television series. So who am I to say it's a bad book? You could do a lot worse than landing there. So that's number one. Don't assume that you're wrong just based on word count. But number two, it's possible that the problem here is that there are things in your head that you think are implied on the page, but they're not. Maybe have an alpha reader read through and help you identify a few of those things. You know, an alpha reader can tell you really quickly, wait, is this happening indoors or outdoors? Is this happening in a big room or a small room? Is this happening in a noisy place or a quiet place? Those are the sorts of questions which might be important to the story. They might be thematic for the universe. There's all kinds of reasons to incorporate setting, and that's just one piece. And an alpha reader is often the best way to find out what those things are. You don't need them to teach you what all of the things are. You just need them to throw the door open so that you can see, oh, that's this whole class of things that I have been underwriting, assuming that the reader has the same mental picture that I have. I bring that up because that's a problem. That's a problem I have a lot. Third, if you are an outliner, try outlining in ways that include statements of the desired effect of the chapter. For instance, this chapter will make them hate the villain. Now, your outline has a task for you, and the task is, I need to include the words that do this thing. It can't just be the plot. It has to be something descriptive. Maybe the use of words with X's and K's in them. I don't know. There's all kinds of things you can do with words, obviously. But as you create these little mission statements, these little fetch quests for yourself in your outline, you will have a better idea of what needs to be written besides just the sequence of things happening that makes it be a story. And you will begin to shape the emotional arc of the reader, because all of these little fetch quests are things like, I want the reader to feel this. Now I want them to feel this. Now I want them to feel like there's no way I could possibly stick the landing on this book, because and that's just fine. You can set those challenges for yourself, and they will encourage you to write more words, which I suspect it's likely you need to write more words.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you're writing a 3 POV epic fantasy novel, right? Like, that many POVs, that genre of fiction, if it truly is epic fantasy, like a 1,500 word chapter is just not long enough to get the amount of information, the amount of work.
It's not going to feel epic. It can feel fantasy.
Exactly. It could feel, I mean, that would work great as like an adventure fantasy, right? Like, as you were talking about, like James Patterson, or like that category of very commercial airport thriller author, has incredibly short chapters. As part of what makes that work, it's very deliberate to have these, like, read, 2 pages, go to bed, tomorrow read another 2 pages, and that's how people get through the book, right?
The Dragonlance novels did not need to do enormous amounts of world building, because we already had mental pictures for a lot of the stuff that was going down.
Yeah.
And so
they
weren't
chapters. I don't remember.
Huh?
It's been a long time since I read those, but yeah.
I don't remember either. I do remember that they were much easier reads than epic
Yes.
fantasy.
Yes.
They weren't themselves epic fantasy, but taken as a body of work. Well, obviously it's epic. It's huge. It's this
Yeah.
whole universe.
Yeah.
But each novel was just a very small installment of that.
Exactly. So one thing to think about as you're doing your outlining, a metaphor I often use for talking about a novel is that it's like a layer cake, right? It feels to me that right now you only have the top layer of the cake, right? And what you need are to continue to layer on more plots, more characters, more elements underneath that top layer, right? So like that main thread, your A plot feels like what's taking you through this 40,000 words, these 50,000 words. And what you need is a B, C, D plot of like, what are the side characters doing? What are other people doing in this world? You know, and also feel free to slow down and have a scene where people are just having a conversation, where they're, you know, eating dinner or they're walking and having a conversation, right? Like, make sure that we are able to feel the connection between these characters and that these people have thoughts and feelings that aren't just about the main plot. And I think that is one of the things that's going to add a lot of depth to your world. You're not just bulking it out, right? The problem isn't that there's not enough words. The problem is that you're not telling enough story that is deep enough to let us really sink into this world, right? If at that word count for this genre, like, you're going to just be skating across the surface of the plot. And what I want you to do is find ways and spots that you can really dip down into it and dig into what are the things that got these characters here? How do they see the world? Why do they think about the world? Like, really dig into those kind of questions. And I think that will end up with a much richer story by the end of it. And you'll find that word count stacking up until you have the kind of big, expansive story that you're trying to tell. That's kind of my instinct without knowing more about exactly where the issue is here. But, you know, I think that process would be really, really helpful for you.
Yeah, you're an outliner, but Dongwon and I are totally pantsing our answers.
Yes. I'm a pantser in general as a person, so, you know, there's a reason I love tabletop role playing as a creative outlet, you know?
It's a good one. Hey, should I read the third question?
Go for it.
Hi. Hello. I'm thinking of releasing my first book for free on an online platform, one chapter a week. Do you have any tips? And how can I use to my advantage the suspense between chapter releases? Thank you.
Howard, you are a person who's released a story in segments on an online platform to an audience that can access it for free.
Fun fact.
How do you keep people coming back? How do you keep up that momentum?
This is almost exactly how Schlock Mercenary unfolded over its 20-year run. Every strip was its own satisfying installment. That is key. But every strip also left questions unanswered or story as yet unfolded for the next day's strip. The single biggest thing that I learned: do not step in as the author and tease your readers. Don't do that.
What do you mean by that? What does that look like?
That looks like, you know, haha, you'll never guess what happens next.
Yeah.
That kind of crap. Okay, I don't remember the specifics or the fallout because literally it's been 22 years since I did anything like that. But I remember doing it during early days and learning that I was way better off not doing it, letting the story handle everything related to the story. And me as the author, if I wanted to get people to read it, I would tell people, hey, you know, there's, you know, come to Schlock Mercenary, epic science fiction, 4 panels at a time, updated daily. Come read the latest strip and, you know, whatever. There were forums where people would discuss the implications of the technology, and often we would, and I was part of that, and we'd wander off into the weeds talking about world building and sci-fi and things that we liked. And that level of, and this is back in the UBB code, you know, the Ultimate Bulletin Board code, early 2000s era of social media, 0.8 beta, and generating that sort of community definitely helped the readership along. But I was not doing anything to tease anybody about what comes next. I was consistent about what came next. It updated every day, and that feels like the one thing that I did right that worked super well to my advantage. A chapter a week that's a pretty good pace. And if these are like 4,500 word chapters, that is a solid drop. That's a solid drop each week. And the challenge, I think, is that where you can get away with in an all at once novel, you can get away with a chapter whose reward is now we have enough information to move to the next chapter. I say get away with because I don't love chapters like that. For something like this, you can't afford to do that. You have to make every chapter satisfying.
Mhm.
Every chapter almost has to function like a first chapter where it asks a question and answers a question very, very quickly to build up trust and delivers something interesting, delivers a hook, and then gets into the meat of what's going on. So I'm not suggesting recaps or anything, but it's a different animal than an all at once. If you've ever held a schlock mercenary book and read through it all in one go, the pacing is weird.
Mm-hmm.
The pacing is weird, but it is what it is. It originally unfolded a day at a time, and I'm not going to go in and adjust the pacing.
Yeah, that would be wild.
Turn it into a print book.
Yeah. It's the difference between watching a TV series versus watching a movie, right? Like the TV series, even if it's like a thing like, like a streaming TV show that everyone is like, this is like a 5-hour movie or whatever, right? Each of those episodes are designed to have a breakpoint that draws you into the next episode, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that they all need to end like on a dun-dun cliffhanger kind of thing that like is, a literal like, action beat that carries the next one. Sometimes it can be on a revelation. It can be on a quieter moment. But you still need to have that thing that ends on a question that you want answered in the next week, and then when you start the next week you have to answer that question, right? You're drawing people across that beat to carry them through and bring them over, right? So that's one thing to think about in terms of how you're approaching that. Another way to think about it is, as Howard was talking about, like a graphic novel versus a collection of a comic book, right? So like if you have something that was released in weekly or monthly issues that is then anthologized, you can feel that pacing sound, or that pacing vibe that, Howard was talking about in terms of a daily comic going into a book. So look at things like that to really sort of feel out where that difference is. But for me, my main advice is make sure I can't remember where this phrase originates from, but it's, come in late, get out early. You know what I mean? Like when you're coming
in late, out early.
In late, out early, right? Like really think about that when you're in these chapters where you want to like start the action someplace that's going to be very grabbing, and you want to be leaving the action a little bit before the story is like really petering out. You know what I mean? You want to leave them hungry at the end of it for the next thing, and you want to be starting with something substantive when you start the next chapter. It'll make for a choppier read when you read the whole thing all at once, but for the kind of pacing you need for a serial thing, I think that's a one way to keep drawing them through the story when releasing into this particular format. So cool. Anything else on this?
It's a great question, and I just want to go on the record and say I love serial formats.
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea of a satisfying installment that is part of something larger. It's one of the reasons that, all right, Phase 5 still loses me, but it's one of the reasons why I love the MCU so much, is that each installment was satisfying, but was serial. And it's amazing. I'm so happy that they got to do it. I love the episodic nature of the episodic serial nature of streaming TV. The Apple series. I was going to say Monsters Unleashed. No, it's
the Godzilla one. What is that thing called?
It's not Mothra, it's Monarch. There we go.
Yeah.
Monarch,
Yeah.
Monster Legacy, whatever.
Legacy of Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. I don't something like that. Yeah.
I,
It is a nonsense title. Is the problem? Yeah.
it's okay. There are titling problems, but I really enjoyed watching it. And I enjoyed Foundation in the same way.
Yeah.
These were fulfilling, satisfying chapters that left me wanting to get more.
Yeah.
It is an art form that I love.
Mhm. Yeah, I love episodic serial content as well. I don't work on it as much, just because I do books mostly, which tend to be less episodic in that way. I mean, like a trilogy is not quite the same vibe. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful.
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, this next question looks like a you thing rather than a me thing.
Sure. Do you want me to read it or do you want to read it?
I will go ahead and read it.
Okay, great.
Trans-specific career question. How to navigate being ready or nearly ready to seek an agent/publication, but indecisive about either a pseudonym to publish under or an actual name change that is not yet 100% settled on. I'm stressed about the finality of renaming myself in a formal legal way, and maybe twice if I opt to publish under another name, and this is quickly coming up as a barrier in my career. Even building social media or personal website under a name that might change again, what to do and how much to worry.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I've worked with a lot of trans authors, some of whom who have changed their name partway through their careers after they started publishing, some of whom changed their name immediately before, right? And some of whom have, come out as trans since and have not changed their name, right? Like it kind of runs the full gamut. There's a bunch of different reasons why to do it, each of these different ways. The ideal is, the perfect case scenario is you figure out what your chosen name is before you start querying. You have all the websites, you have all the things, the legal name change is done, blah, 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 blah. Great, easy. Unfortunately, as anybody who's experienced this would know, is transition is rarely that clean or straightforward or clear even to the person experiencing it, right? So my main thing to you is don't stress about it too much, right? If you know that you want to change your name, yes, you should probably change it before you publish your first book. That is going to make your life a lot simpler. If you're not sure that you want to change your name or you don't know what you want to change it to, then that's also okay. Maybe a pen name is a good idea. If there's a pen name that you can settle on, that you're comfortable with and happy with, and you don't mind that being separate from what people call you in a day-to-day basis, then separate those two out, decouple it a little bit, and then you can have a pen name that reads as the gender presentation that you want, whether it's non-binary, whether that's a gendered name or whatever it is, then, you can just have that, and then your own chosen name is something that is still a personal decision that's up to you and how you want to be in the world, right? And your legal name is separate from what you publish under. That's totally fine. That could be something as simple as like, okay, I know I want to have the B as the first letter. I just can't decide if I want to be like Birch or Bream or whatever, right? And then you can just use an initial and publish under that, right? If you know your last name's not going to change, if you know but you want to publish under that. So there are ways around it. That said, I've handled it with just full on name changes. The publishers I've worked with have been very willing on reprint to reissue the book with the new name on the cover, update the metadata, update the copy. For ebooks and stuff, very easy to do. Print books, obviously a little bit more difficult. You will have physical copies out there with a dead name and some of them may be actively sold while they sell through the stock. But generally publishers, in my experience, have been very down to work with us on this. They're not going to spend billions of dollars to solve it, but when they can do it without costing a lot of money, they will do it, right? So that's something to keep in mind. You're not necessarily locked in forever just because it was published under one name initially. So you do have some flexibility there. In general, go ahead and grab the website of the name that you're currently using. Go ahead and grab a website of the pen name. Website domains aren't that expensive if you can grab them. They're either incredibly expensive and you can't get them, in which case you would need your own one anyways, or you can get one for like fairly cheap as a annual expense. So, I always encourage people, if you think you might use it, go ahead and grab that URL, right? So if you have a sense of what you want your chosen name to be, if you have a sense of what you want your pen name to be, go ahead and grab those. Go ahead and grab your legal name one anyways. It can be useful to have those things. Honestly, you might just want to have redirects from all those going to the same place anyway, so you just have one website. You don't have to worry too much about the URL. There's lots of different options there. So don't worry about it too much. There are solutions, there are options. People in the industry will work with you and are generally pretty understanding about this. If you build a lot of brand recognition under one name and you want to switch to something very different, that can be tricky to transition people over to that. You will lose some people in making that transition, right, from one brand to another, which is why maybe like a pen name might be a good solution here. But it's all solvable. These are all solvable problems.
Yeah.
People have solved them, and there's plenty of ways to handle it. So I hope that helps, and I hope you figure out sort of what you would like to do next year. It's a fun choice to make. So
Yeah. I just want to say I don't envy you. I don't envy you this question. I love being secure in my identity and having been secure in it for a long time. And that is, and I acknowledge this freely, that is a position of privilege that has been granted to me for a number of reasons. And it's made a lot of things a lot easier. I've owned the howardtaylor.com website, domain name forever. One of the things that I want to raise, and I want to couch this in the please don't take this out of context kind of terms, but at some level, the professional side of this, there is a branding exercise happening. Yep. You are waiting to create a brand until you have the identity that sits behind the brand. My friend Ben McSweeney, not trans, not he cis white my age dude, his website is inkthinker.net. If Ben ever decided to change his name or his gender or whatever else, inkthinker.net, the works of Ben McSweeney, could become inkthinker.net, the works of Betty McSweeney. That could happen. And I just want to put that out as an option. There might be an adjective or a phrase or something that describes what you want to be without being your name, that would function as a website, that would let you plant a flag so that you could stress less about having planted a flag. Mm-hmm. And that's my goal here. I do not want to create stress because, oh my gosh, my Garmin has beeped at me 3 times during this conversation saying abnormally high heart rate detected. Seriously. So just thinking about this on your behalf. So you have my blessing. You have my prayers. Good luck with this. And thank you for asking the question, because this is one that I think we all needed to hear.
Yeah, it's a great question. Okay, cool. We have a question from the chat, if we want to dive into that one real quick. So Kara asks, I've queried a project for a year and gotten significant feedback to the effect of compelling query and pages, but I can't sell it. I think it's probably time to shift my efforts to indie. However, I have another project I'm querying. Is there a risk in pursuing trad and indie simultaneously, querying while preparing to release an indie? Short answer, no, there isn't really a risk here. You can happily pursue a trad publication for your next book and take your previous book out on your own to, and self-publish it or publish it through a small press. Like, any of that is perfectly fine. It won't significantly impact your next deal, right? I tend to think of the indie world and the trad world as quite separate these days. The way the market has evolved, they tend to operate pretty independently of each other without a ton of crossover, either in terms of like professional awareness or individual readership or things like that. So in general, I would say you're fine to sort of like pursue what you need to pursue and expand that way. So Howard, do you have any particular thoughts on it?
Um, Years ago, someone asked me a similar sort of question. They had a novel out for consideration, and they hadn't heard back, and were starting work on something else, but were having trouble getting motivated on it. And I asked them, well, listen, if you get rejected, will that make you stop wanting to write anymore? They said, no. Okay, awesome. If you get accepted, will that make you stop wanting to write anymore? No. Awesome. This is a great position to be in. You have submitted things and you still want to write. Keep wanting that. I like the fact, Dongwon, that there's no risk in pursuing, trad and indie simultaneously. I mean, as long as you're not charging twice for the same thing, you can't sell rights of first publication if you have already published it first. But this whole the whole convoluted emotional roller coaster of submitting things and getting rejected and then needing to write something else, that's I said this much earlier in the podcast. Big mood. So feel it. And if you can feel it and still feel like writing, you're winning.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, find whatever route forward is available to you and you pursue that. And I don't think that pursuing this particular path is going to close any doors for you. And you'll be able to continue to pursue your goals as you see fit. So I think sounds like a great idea to me. Cool. Any other questions from the chat? I think we're kind of I hit the end of our questions here. So if anyone from the YouTube stream, if you guys have a question for us, please feel free to drop it in. And same from the Zoom chat. But yeah, in the meantime, Howard, are you watching anything good these days?
I already told you that you need to watch Parasite the Grey.
Oh yeah, my cousin was talking to me about that the other night too. Yeah.
Oh boy.
All right, I'll put it on the list.
And I don't know. Do you speak Korean? I mean, can you watch?
Very little.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. See, I speak none. And watching the subtitles, where the one character says, you have a monster in you. It's like you are like Jekyll and Hyde, is what the subtitles are saying. And when he says Hyde, the actor says Hyde.
Yeah.
And I'm pronouncing it terribly. Obviously, but and I realized, oh my goodness, so the Korean, the audible dialogue, or the original language used Jekyll and Hyde as a metaphor. Hey, that's pretty cool. And then in a later episode, he wants to just give a name to this alternate personality, and the translation says Heidi, and the pronunciation is Heide. And it's so close to Heide that I realized they're making a Korean, and I get it. Yeah.
Nice.
Hey, so
it's nice
that
when you
was
see
my
that
big win.
Cross-linguistic humor like make it through. You know what I mean? So.
Oh, but anyway, I feel like it's the subtitling at any rate is it's a compelling story, and the special effects, VFX. In this decade, we call them VFX. Are quite
I think people
good.
still know what you mean when you say special effects. So
they still know, but apparently in the trade, special effects now means more practical effects, and VFX is what you're talking about when it's animated, computered, whatever. So yeah, Parasite the Grey. Watch that.
Okay. Cool. I'll have to add it to the list.
What about you?
I just saw Civil War, the new Alex Garland movie of the night, which I really loved. It was incredibly stressful and harrowing. It reminded me of watching Children of Men, which is one of my favorite movies. I sort of feel like there's probably discourse happening around Civil War right now. I don't really know what it is. I haven't been tracking it. I was pretty blown away by it. It's a very intense experience to watch. I definitely recommend going into it knowing what you're getting into. And I was sweating within like 2 minutes of that movie starting and basically did not stop until it ended. I was like shaking when I left the theater. Like it was very intense. I found it personally quite upsetting, in part just because like a lot of it takes place near places I live, and it is a story about violence coming to America in some very intense ways that felt really real to me. But I thought the movie kicked ass. It's about journalism and it's about photography, two topics that are very near and dear to my heart. As you can tell behind me, am a photographer. One of the characters was using one of my cameras like throughout the whole film, and that was like very nice. I was like, a little shout out for the Nikon FM2.
Well, it's nice of you to loan them your camera.
I know. Yeah, Alex Garland called me personally to ask. But no, I really loved it. And my first job out of school was working in news journalism, so like it felt very near and dear to my heart in a very specific way. So I really liked it. And then I just watched the Fallout show, which I don't know.
Me too.
Still figuring how I feel about it. Did you like it? What'd you think of it?
I loved it. I understand that the arc is a Fallout arc, not a Howard Taylor arc. It's grim.
Oh
The
yeah,
Fallout
it's very
universe
grim.
is grim, but it's grim comedy.
Yes.
And I am impressed. I am impressed with how well they translated the game to the screen. Todd Howard of Bethesda has gone on record saying, "Oh yeah, the Fallout TV show is totally canon. It's not Fallout 5. Eventually we will make Fallout 5." But and when he said that, I'm like, oh, that means the Fallout movie or TV show can't have a happy ending because you still have to have a game. But it was quite enjoyable. The visuals. At one point, Todd Howard said, yeah, in the games, we stayed away from this question completely, but our writers for the TV show came to me and said, so, hey, we wrote this episode where we talk a little bit about incest. And Todd Howard's response was, did you now? Wow, that's cool. Go for it.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the humor. I mean, Fallout is like one of my franchises. Like in terms of video games, like Fallout was probably the first one that like I truly became obsessed with. You know, Fallout 2 remains one of my top 5 video games of all time. You know, I'm not a huge fan of the Bethesda Fallout games, to be honest. I have played so many hundreds and hundreds of hours of those games. I have spent a great deal of time in those games, in those worlds, and I really enjoy it in the way that I enjoy Skyrim. But like narratively and tonally and some of the world building stuff, I have critiques. And so some of that carried over into the show in a way that, you know, for me, I'm more of like a Fallout 2 New Vegas kind of fan rather than Fallout 3 and 4. And the show felt very much like Fallout 5, right? And so I think a lot of my critiques kind of come from that space. I also have like a little bit of a thing of like, I do not know what watching this show is like if you've never played a Fallout game. Like there's stuff.
I sat next to Sandra while she watched it, and she let's see if I can
because like there's stuff like the Enclave is mentioned in the first episode as a very important thing. It is never we see it, but it's never explained what it is, and it never comes up again in any way. And so I just sort of had this thing of sort of like, who is this for? You know what I mean? If it's for, and a lot of the revelations of the show felt like stuff we've seen from the games, right? Tonally, it's like the kind of things that we learn, the kind of like big reveals are very like Fallout game reveals, which is cool that they were able to replicate that vibe. But to some extent, I was like, I've seen this a few times.
We expect that. We
Exactly.
expect that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
I was having a conversation with a friend. Oh, go ahead. What was Sandra's thing?
no, I was just Sandra's take on it was she liked that it was funny. She liked that the main character had an emotional arc that moves from purity and
Yeah.
optimism to um, competence and flirtation with cynicism.
Yeah.
And she would love for that character to end in a happy place in future seasons. And that's where Sandra said, I don't know if this is the series for me because
Yeah.
are characters allowed to land in happy places?
It doesn't. I liked what they did with her because it didn't feel like she ended in a place of pure cynicism. It feels
Yeah.
like she ends in a place of pragmatism and survival, but still doesn't lose her optimism. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's still something there to her that feels materially different from the people around her, especially from the ghoul, right? Like,
Yep.
and I really liked what they did with her arc, and I really liked the ghoul. I love Walton Goggins, one of my favorite
Oh
actors,
my gosh, he
and
was
he's
so good.
so good in this role and so fun in this role, both in the flashbacks and in the contemporary timeline.
Yep.
Um,
And one of the things that Walter Goggins has said is that it'll be nice to not be, oh, hey, you're that one guy. It'll be, oh, you played the ghoul, because
yeah,
he's been in so many
yeah,
things
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
everybody recognizes his face, but nobody can put their finger on a definitive role
Those people did
that,
not watch Justified then because he is unforgettable from Justified.
I mean, there's a lot of people in the
I know, I
world
know,
who
I
have
know.
seen Walter Goggins but
Yeah,
haven't
yeah,
seen that.
yeah.
And with Fallout, he's just excited that now people will recognize him and know his name.
I hope so. That man
I
deserves
hope so
all the
too.
credit in the world. I think he's a wonderful actor. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, I watched Fallout over the course of a few days. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I had a good time. I have my critiques, but that's because I am cranky and I have opinions about media professionally. So those two things result in a very distinct perspective. Okay, well, we don't have any more questions, and we are kind of at our end time here, so maybe we'll just wrap it here. Thank you guys for sitting through a little bit of media talk at the end here. That was actually quite fun. I keep wanting us to have like a movie club podcast, like as a bonus podcast. I keep getting shut down, so apparently no one else wants this, but I would love that.
Shut down by whom? This is the first time you've asked me. Dongwon, I'm in.
I brought it up at every strategy meeting.
Really?
Yeah, I think the idea is we don't really have enough time for it, but I don't know. I think it'd be fun. All of us like watching media. We all have.
I should
Opinions
pay
about
more
media.
attention during the strategy meetings.
Yeah, Howard, you're always tuning out on me. You know. No, absolutely not. You were great in those meetings. Anyways, moving on. Maybe we'll do that as a Patreon content one day. Thank you everyone for coming to the Q&A this month. We really appreciate having you all here. We love answering these questions for you. We'll continue to do these monthly. If you would like to submit a question ahead of time, go to patreon.com/writingexcuses. You can do that, and you can also join the Zoom room, and there's a Zoom chat as well for Patreon members. We also have a Discord, and you'll also get ad-free podcast streams. So if you are sick of hearing us shilling for various products or hearing ads in your feed, then feel free to hop over to Writing Excuses on Patreon and back us there. Yeah, anything you want to promote this month, Howard?
I hope you got your taxes done because today's April 16th, my fellow Americans.
Indeed. If you didn't, you got bigger problems than us. Yeah, so I think at this point, you're out of excuses. Now go write. Bye, guys.